Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_daddy. Thought I could sneak a drink in there and almost choked to death. All right, so because today for you people is, I said it, is the official start of free agency. Well, that's not true. It is the official start of the legal tampering period, which does begin, by the way, at 12 Eastern, 11 o'clock Central. So because that is the start, and because, as you know, time can, in fact, get away from me just a touch, I have to start with what we have to start with. And if we don't have time to get to all the other stuff, the news and notes, then we won't get to it. By the way, Myles Garrett got a big contract, so we will either elaborate on that or we won't. But I had mentioned recently that we've been talking about the same people over and over and over and over and over again, and we're kind of missing out on a lot of people. And what's very likely to happen is that the Packers are going to do some things, and some of the things are not going to be the big-name people that we've been talking about. So I got a list here from The Athletic. They have the top, scrolling, 150 free agents. Now, I don't expect to go through every single one of these, but they put them into tiers. And I want to go through them because what's going to be really annoying is to say, yeah, we spent like 4 weeks talking about free agency and we signed, let's say, 4 people, and somewhere between 0 and 1 of them is somebody we've been talking about, and the other 3 is like, didn't even know they were a free agent. And so I at least want to touch on some of these. I don't necessarily agree with their rankings. There are 4 people in tier 1. I would not put... I don't know if I'd put any of them. Maybe Josh Sweat in tier 1. And then, for example, tier 2, I would much rather have Khalil Mack and DJ Reed, but I understand the age component and whatnot. But aside, we'll briefly mention the people that we've been talking about a lot, but I want to make sure, especially the higher tier people, that we go through them, especially in positions that we need, again, to at least touch on it. Give you a very brief overview, give you my thoughts on whether I would be a fan or not, and that's about that. So, tier 1, as I said, there's 4 people. The absolute top prospect that they have on here, I do not agree with, but we absolutely need to talk about them because it could be a move the Packers make. It could be a massive move that actually has really positive implications. I don't know that it would be something I would want to do, but could go either way. And that is defensive tackle Milton Williams, it is funny because we've been talking about a million different people and you say, okay, who is the top guy? And it's like, here's a guy nobody's been talking about. Plus, like I said, or I've been saying, really not a lot of good defensive tackles to pick from. And number 1 on the list is a defensive tackle. Now, the positives about Milton Williams, if you just look in a very narrow prism, this is a massive slam dunk that we absolutely have to do. Number 1 is he is 26 years old. That's massive, and Gutekunst is excited about that. Number 2, he had 54 pressures on 418 attempts. Come on, calculator. 54 divided by 418 is 13% pressure rate, which is solid, and 8 sacks, which is also pretty solid. Why would you not want a 26-year-old that is a dominant pass rusher? Guy had a 92 pass rush grade, 76 overall, 41 run defense is not the best, but elite pass rusher for a team that needs to get home with 4. This is your dude. 100,000% this is your guy. And you know what? That might really be all we need to talk about. I do have one brief caveat, and that is something that always annoys me, or I should say scares me, and that is he spent 3 years prior to this not being a good football player, and he played on a defense where everything was going right, and it's entirely possible that this was a very inflated year, similar to, like I've said, with the 2018 Chicago Bears. Everybody on that team was elite, even not good players. They were very good for that 1 year, and that immediately went back to not being very good. Like Prince Amukamura, right? He's always been kind of an guy. He was one of the top cornerbacks in football that year, and then immediately wasn't. This happens to defenses all the time. Just everything is clicking. Everything is working. And, it's just easy for everybody. Because you got a good secondary behind you, because you got a bunch of guys next to you that are all getting after it, it just makes everything so much easier on you. And guess what? That's not going to happen again for him. Well, maybe it will if we can replicate that, but if that's the case, we can get just about anybody. We don't need to pay him whatever it is he's going to be asking for. Now, I don't know that that's exactly the scenario, that he's a guy that had a 60 pass rush grade, a 60 pass rush grade, and a 62 pass rush grade for his first 3 years, and then a 92. Listen, let me put it this way. He's going to regress. It's a question of how much. And when you're talking about a guy that had a 13% pressure rate and 8 sacks, it's not like he had a 18% and 15 sacks, and it's like, well, maybe he'll go down to 13 and 8. No, that's his ceiling, and he's coming back down from that. And he's a horrifically bad run defender. And I think the pass rush is a little bit fake. 25 pressures and 2 sacks in 2023 on 322 attempts. That's a 7.7% pressure rate and 2 sacks. In fact, in his first 3 years, he has 8 sacks in 3 years, and then he got 8 this year. He's kind of a bad pass rusher for 3 straight years. Now, Za'Darius was, as I said, a situation where he wasn't super great for 3 years, kind of broke out in his 4th year. We picked him up, and it turned out pretty well, at least for 2 years before things spiraled. But I tend to think that's more of an outlier, and I get very annoyed when people say, well, Za'Darius did it, so, that means this is going to be the... No, that's... Okay, yeah, and I know. Everybody that drops passes is Davante, and everybody that's bad for 3 years and then good for a year is great. I would just say, based on what this guy's probably going to get paid, he's going to get massively overpaid. If I had to guess whether he was going to regress or stay the same or get better, shockingly in favor of regressing. Again, 60, 60, 62, 92. So yeah, if we just look at 2024, 26-year-old that played for an elite defense, like everybody wants to be the Eagles. Let's just go buy the Eagles' defensive line. Okay, the problem with that is you can't buy the entire defensive line. At best, you can get 2 of them. And you can't get the corners, and you can't get the defensive coordinator who built the defense. So let's just not get too carried away with this. We need to be the Eagles. We need to be the Eagles. We need to be the Eagles, which again, even the Eagles weren't the Eagles for almost the entire year. So I'm a little torn. If we get him, fingers crossed that we just got ourselves a young, elite, pass-rushing defensive tackle. But I'm absolutely going to be nervous that it's fool's gold and we just wasted a bunch of money. The number 2 person on their Tier 1 list is wide receiver Chris Godwin. Now, Chris Godwin has been a very good receiver for a very long time. He is 6'1", 208, was a third-round pick in 2017, had 4.42 speed, so he's got decent enough speed. His PFF grades have been very, very good with, you want to talk about consistently good. 82, 80, 91, 76, 81, 76, 77, 86. He did get hurt this past year, has not played since week 7 of last year, but even in those games, his worst graded game was a 66. He had 576 yards in less than a half a season and 5 touchdowns in, 7 games? 86 PFF grade, 86 receiving grade, 90 drop grade with 0 drops. His career drop rate is 4.2%. Prior to this year getting hurt, he had over 1,000 yards 5 seasons in a row. He's a good receiver. Here's my issue, and maybe you care, maybe you don't. 29 years old. He looks like he had a dislocated left ankle during a game against the Baltimore Ravens on October 21st. That sounds pretty significant. So 29 years old, ankle injuries, especially severe ones like dislocated ankles, are probably a bit of a problem. And then the next issue is that he's a slot receiver. Again, whether or not you like Jayden Reed is kind of irrelevant to the fact that I don't think the Packers are looking to replace Jayden Reed. And I also don't think that helps us very much because right now we have guys that kind of work. If you're getting rid of Jayden Reed, then all you're really doing is improving a position, but you're not really fixing, right? We Jayden Reed is one of the things that we kind of have figured out. It's not great, but I think one of the biggest issues is we couldn't play man coverage. And so, Jayden couldn't really win when teams would play us in man, and we didn't have an ability to get them out of that. Because there was nobody on this team that could attack in such a... So in other words, if we can find better complementary pieces, X receiver, number one receiver, whatever you want to call it. If we can find a better complementary piece, then I think that will help Jaden Reed a lot. They can't just lock into man coverage all the time and take him away. And so even if you go get 29-year-old broken Chris Godwin, all you've done is a short-term solution in which you erased one of our long-term solutions and didn't actually fix the overarching problems that we have. So, it's maybe a little bit less about the fact that I don't think it's a good idea and more about the fact that I don't think the Packers think it's a good idea. I don't think the Packers are going to do it. I don't think this is what they're exactly interested in. And it's maybe a decent solution for a different team, not as much for us. Number 3 on the tier 1 list is Davante Adams. Probably don't need to go a ton in Davante, but we should clarify a little bit sort of where he's, how his career has been doing, just so we're clear. I think we've gone over this already in the past, and it is worth noting that, a couple things. Let's just start here. First of all, I had been saying for years, he's got to come down at some point, right? That was my thing with Davante. So 2015 to 2016, he went from 59 to a 72, from a 72 to an 81, from an 81 to an 88. And at this point in 2018, I had been, doing my podcast for like a year or whatever, 2 years at the conclusion of 2018. So going into 2019, I'm thinking, okay, 88 is probably the peak, right? 87.8. Then he has an 88. I'm like, okay, well, that's the peak. He's going to start coming down at some point. 2020, it goes from an 88 to a 92. I'm like, all right, now guaranteed it's coming down. And even if it goes to an 88, it's got to come down. It went to a 92.7. Freaking A, right? So at that point, I'm like, all right, I give up. I'm not going to doubt him anymore. You never know what happens. Well, at this point, 2021 is when things start to go down. I will say there's sort of excuses or reasons that you could see why this would happen. So it goes down from a 93, 92.7, down to a 90. Still an elite guy. He did go to the Raiders, though. But he was playing with Derek Carr, who's his buddy, all this stuff. 2023, it drops from a 90 to a 79. That is a drastic drop-off. However, that's also the year that Josh Jacobs had a drastic drop-off because everybody hated being there. The locker room was terrible. The quarterback sucked. It was a miserable environment, and he still had 1,144 yards, 8 touchdowns, and almost an 80 PFF grade. In fact, it was an 80 receiving grade. And then the next year, it went from a 79 down to a 76, and his receiving grade was a 77. Again, still not bad. So you got a guy that's with the Las Vegas Raiders, who suck, but it was only for 3 weeks. And then starting in week 7, he went to the Jets, entirely new team, dysfunctional locker room, all kinds of problems. And despite all of the problems that happened, he still managed over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns and a 77 receiving grade. It's possible that if you get him back to Green Bay in a familiar offensive system with Matt LaFleur that works really hard at making sure that he gets open and, Jordan can do a good job of getting the ball to him and everything else, that we could actually see a little bit of a resurgence. Probably not 2021 93 PFF grade resurgence, but enough to at least believe that it doesn't have to be a continued downward spiral, that he could at least maintain or possibly even revert back, maybe give us a little bit of an 80 or an 85 type of season. The other way to look at this, though, is the very obvious way, which is his career got better and better and better. At 2021, he's pushing 30 years old, and he starts to go down, and he hit a wall at 30. He hit a hard wall at 30 and is continuing to go down. He is 32 years old right now, and he will, don't really know how quickly, but he will probably continue to descend downward. I don't really know where I fall on that spectrum. I do think it's possible we could squeeze another year or two out of him, but that is a drastic drop-off from and the biggest argument against the pro-Davante side is the fact that he was elite in 2022 with Las Vegas. And then there was the big drop-off. And again, all the excuses and everything else, fine, but it is a drastic, hit-a-wall style drop-off right when he hit 30 years old. He's still Davante. He's got something left in the tank, but it's not a good sign when you see those kinds of rapid declines from 93 to 90 to 79 to 76. it's not really a great sign that this is a guy that's going to be playing long into his 30s. Like that freak DNA where a guy can just play forever, which I don't know if there's ever really been wide receivers or very many that have done that. Maybe played until they're old, but not played at a high level when they're old. Seems to be a pretty firm wall for wide receivers, and I would say 32 is really pushing it. So I like Davante. I know he can give us something. I'm confident he would be better than most of the guys that we have. He's a guy that stays healthy pretty generally. I mean, he'll miss a game here or there, as we know. He would occasionally miss games, but not massive amounts of time. The funny thing is, he's actually not the greatest when it comes to his hands. He had 10 drops this past season, 9 drops the season before, which is 8% and almost 11%. So the drops were actually pretty bad for him last year. So it's not even like he's a guy that's going to come in and have better hands necessarily. He had 8 drops just with Aaron Rodgers, and that was about a half a season worth. 8 drops in 11 games. And he had 2 drops in just 3 games with the Raiders. So, I mean, he had 10 drops, and he missed weeks 4, 5, and 6, which I think might have been like maybe 2 bye weeks, or maybe he missed a game due to injury. I don't really know exactly how that panned out. But final thing I'll point out that I guess I didn't even really realize, the Jets used him a lot as a slot receiver. He was playing in the slot 52% of the time. His career average, and this even includes 2024, which obviously is pretty diluted by the rest of his career, but his career average is 24%. They put him in the slot 52% of the time, to the degree that in 6 games, he was primarily a slot. 55%, 72%, 53%, 66%, 59%, 57% in those 6 games as a slot receiver. The lowest was 36%, and again, his career average is 24%. So he was widely used as a slot receiver, which again, if we're looking for excuses as to why things really are not looking great, there's a lot of reasons why the last 2 years have been uncharacteristic and why you could expect a bit of a bounce back. It's a big gamble because you just don't know. Final guy in this tier before we take a break is Josh Sweat. Talked about Josh Sweat a decent amount. He is not, if you're just looking at like PFF grades, he's not an elite player. His grades, let's see, he was a 4th-round pick in 2018. His grades have been 65, 62, 70, 76, 83, or 84, and then it went down to 67 and 70. With that said, however, he is one of those guys, very Packers-esque, where the grades might not be the greatest, but the stats are quite good. And this applies for pressure guys like myself, as well as people who are pure sack people. If we just look over the last 4 years, which is really when he's kind of had his starting career. Prior to that, it looked like he was a little bit more rotational, but 46 pressures and 9 sacks on 414 attempts. I'm not going to calculate all these, but that's obviously at least a little bit above 10%. 51 on 417, that's solidly above 10%, and 15 sacks. 70 pressures on about 600 and 8 sacks, and then 66 pressures on 550 attempts and 11 sacks. So that's not just a this year thing. Now, the grades were 67 pass rush grade. That's not that good, right? And that's very similar to like Rashawn Gary and a lot of other guys where for whatever reason they don't grade out very well. They probably just lose and lose ugly, but, then there's that one. It only takes 1 sack in a game for you to be a superhero. He had 11 sacks, which is great. Most games, how many he had? 0, like most people. 12 games with 0 sacks in them. Still had a good season. So, pressures and sacks are things that happen very rarely, but you don't, again, 10%. That means 9 times out of 10, you did not get a pressure. So you could pretty easily see a scenario where you don't grade out super well, but still end up with decent statistics depending on what happens in those other 8, 9 attempts. But, it feels to me to be one of the safer options. He's not yet 28, 27.9, so he's relatively young at, we'll call it 28 years old. The grades are not elite, but they're solid. I do think he's probably going to get an outsized contract based on the fact that he's coming off the Eagles' defensive line. All these guys are probably going to get a little bit overpaid. But I'm certainly not opposed to it at all. I think he would be a good addition to the room. Not an elite player, but a solid player, a 11, 12% pressure guy that can get you 8, 9, 10 sacks in a season. He also does have experience as a stand-up outside linebacker as well as a down defensive end. He's done both. I think he's primarily been a down defensive end. This past year, he was a stand-up guy, and it, obviously didn't affect him negatively. The last time that he was a down defensive end is when he hit his highest pressure total at 70. So I think it makes sense. I think it's a good addition. I don't think it's it's not a Myles Garrett trade or anything like that, which, again, is off the table, but it's not something like that. It's not Trey Hendrickson, although he is 2 years younger than Trey, which is a perk. Doesn't mean he's going to, for all I know, his career is already on the downswing, and Trey Hendrickson's got 5 more years left in him. Age is, like Gutekunst said, it has more to do with how many years are out in front of you, and I don't know the answer to that. Some guys can play until they're 36 years old. Some guys start falling apart at 29. So I don't really know. You just kind of assume that if you're 2 years younger that you have 2 years more to play, but you really don't know. I'm sure injury history, how big of a guy, if 245 pounds compared to 265 or 75 or whatever, you might assume that, they'll hold up a little bit longer. I don't know, but all right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll start ripping through some of the tier 2 people, probably not all of them, but we'll focus on positions that matter. I don't care about Sam Darnold, for example, and we'll try to touch on, again, more of the people that we have not necessarily talked about. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, let's sort of speed round this bad boy a little bit. So at 5, they got Sam Darnold, don't care. Justin Reed, the safety, don't really care. Charvarius Ward, we did already talk about. Charvarius Ward, good football player for the 49ers, went through a tragic situation with his daughter. Like I said, it really just comes down to where his head's at. He is 29 years old, 6'1", 196. Not opposed to it at all. I obviously don't want to hold it against him what he went through, but there is just a question of how much football is a priority in his life right now. Khalil Mack, I've already talked about. He has not dipped even a little bit. The fact that he's 34 means nothing to me. The dip could start this year, but even then, it's not going to become, wow, he's just dog crap now. All right, we were just contemplating how year 3 of Davante's slide might still be okay. Khalil Mack has not even begun to slide yet, so I could not give a crap about his age. He is still, and always has been, one of the premier pass rushers. By the way, we have to add somebody to the list. This is one of the news items that is not going to be on this list. Edge rusher Von Miller was released. I thought about him because he reminds me very much of Khalil Mack, just in the fact that he's been dominant since the dawn of time. There is a bit of a difference, though, and this really comes down to, like I said, different size dudes, man. Von Miller is and always has been pretty elite. The problem is he hasn't been healthy for 3 straight years with Buffalo. So I don't even need to look into it. If you look at his snap counts, it's about 900 snaps. Starting in 2022 when he went to Buffalo, it was 450, 298, and 332. His 2 of those 3 years, he was still an elite pass rusher, and I still think he can be an elite pass rusher, but he is 36 years old, and at 250 pounds, his body is broke down. So, again, looking at the Brian Gutekunst criteria of how much is out in front of him, I think we know the answer to that. At 36, with a body that has not played a full season since 2021, probably. Buffalo traded for him and didn't get one good year out of him. And by good, I just mean, the Jair standard of good, where being good is not enough. You also have to be good and on the field. So we'll add him to the list of potential suitors, but also probably not so much. DJ Reed. DJ Reed is maybe top of my list just insofar as it's just a slam dunk. We can go in a couple different ways as far as edge rusher. We can go in a couple different ways as far as defensive tackle, one of those ways being just not addressing it until the draft. DJ Reed is just what I want. That's all there is to it. Scheme fit is there. Consistency is there. 28 years old is still on the old side of the young spectrum, 26, 7, 8. I guess it's kind of the it's not young, like fresh coming off a rookie contract, which I said is super rare. It's kind of second contracty, but 28 is perfectly fine. Robert Saleh, 49ers guy. He is, again, perfect schematic fit for the Green Bay Packers and what they want to do. It's just, yes, that's what I want. Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, we've already talked about the two defensive tackles. Sort of wouldn't be opposed to it necessarily in terms of just a body. The problem is we have a lot of bodies at defensive tackle, and I'd like to do something a little bit better. There's potential for something good to happen there, but I'm a little bit more skeptical. Stephon Diggs, a wide receiver, an option, not a great one. A little bit of a head case. I don't know that that's exactly what we're looking for. At 15 is guard Will Fries. Will Fries is another one of those kind of fourth-year breakout guys. He's a seventh-round pick out of Penn State for the Indianapolis Colts. He was he didn't play his rookie year very much. He played about a half a season his second year. He was a full-time starter in 2023 and wasn't very good. 61 grades, 60 run blocking, 65 pass blocking. 2024 was somewhat of a breakout, but it was 268 snaps. He played in 5 total games. He was good in those games, but the sample size is just too small. I honestly don't know why he would be the 15th highest, aside from just it's a crap free agent class. But, I don't have a ton of desire here. Outside of, again, we need depth on the offensive line. This could be a guy that could come in and compete, similar to what we did with, what's-his-name at left tackle, right? That was a first-round pick that we gave a shot to, and he provided some depth and, whatever. Outside of that, there's not much there. Drew Dahlman, we already talked about, the Falcons guy, very good run blocker. Not sure about the rest of it. I would not be opposed to it, to be completely honest. I think we need help run blocking, and also the pass blocking is a concern. I don't know it's worse than what we have, and centers don't give up as much, although a constantly collapsed pocket would be a bit of a problem. What else we got? Carlton Davis, cornerback. Carlton Davis is a fantastic raise your floor type of a prospect. He spent, 6 years in Tampa Bay, last year with Detroit. Last year was one of his best years, arguably his best year, 75 overall, 78 run defense, and 72 coverage. But even if he goes back to his worst year, outside of his rookie year, which was 2023, he had a 63 coverage grade. Gave up that's way too low. 828 yards, 5 touchdowns, kind of sucks. 2 picks, 8 pass breakups. Again, it's not great. I think it's just, if you're just looking for a guy that can start on the outside, I think I'm okay with that. I guess the question I would have is, I think the Packers are more content with the guys that they have than I am. Would they bring in 28-year-old Carlton Davis to be sort of a corner when, in my opinion, it's better than what we have? I don't know if it's, in their opinion, better than what we have. And even from my perspective, as much as I would be okay with it, when you look at the cost of Carlton Davis, whatever that may be, compared to basically having a bunch of free corners that are doing a decent enough job on the outside, and there's no guarantee Carlton Davis is going to come in and be better than what we would already have. I would just rather say, take a big swing or don't. I mean, we do need depth, but you don't get Carlton Davis for depth. He's just like a half a step or a one step above the guys that we have. I'd rather get a good piece, and if you want depth, find somebody that isn't so expensive. Find depth in the draft. At 20 is Malcolm Koonce. He is a 27-year-old 2021 third-round pick out of Buffalo. Very strange and unique circumstances surrounding him. So, Malcolm Koonce didn't really play much his first 2 years at all. Year 3 was kind of his big breakout year. He played 500 snaps, which is not a massive number. He was still a pretty rotational guy. His breakout came like the second half of the year, which makes it even more enticing, in my opinion. His first half of the year kind of sucked. Starting in week 10, though, his grades, for example, were 91, 58, 91, 71, 92, 78, 54, and 79. So, I mean, if you were to just look at that, he's probably comfortably in the 90s from week 10 on. He had 52 pressures and 8 sacks on 344 attempts. And again, every single sack came from week 9 on. So he had 8 sacks from week 9 through week 18. And a good chunk of those pressures also came later on. But that's really impressive. If you're talking 52 divided by 344, that's over 15% pressure rate. And then again, 8 sacks on top of that. And, again, 500 attempts is not even that much. So if you extrapolate his total attempts and, looking at the sacks, obviously we know his pressure rate, but his sack rate must have been extremely high. Give him the amount of attempts that a lot of other guys had. He's comfortably in the double-digit sack category. So it's certainly intriguing. But then, unfortunately, he had a serious knee injury in practice 3 days before the season opener and was put on IR. And then later on, about 3 weeks later, they had to put him under for season-ending surgery. So very intriguing potential prospect. 6'2", 250 pounds. Again, third-round prospect out of Buffalo. He has played as a down defensive end. And again, he really only had one opportunity to prove himself. His first 2 years, he had a grand total of, 73 total pass rush attempts in his first 2 years. And he graded out poorly. His first season, he had 48 total snaps, had a 61 grade. His second season, he had 68 total snaps and had a 47 grade. Really did not go very well. But then again, 2023, they started giving him more opportunities. He was at least like a number 3 edge rusher or something to that effect. 81 PFF grade, 79 pass rush, 15% pressure rate, and 8 sacks. This is a guy that we have not talked about. I have not really considered looking into, that I would be certainly intrigued by. The knee injury is obviously a little bit scary. I guess it really just comes down to medicals and how his knee's holding up. But again, he's not even 27. He's 26 and a half years old. For a cheap enough price, I would be very intrigued in, I wouldn't expect this to be like, okay, it's done. Like we nailed it. We don't have to touch anything in the draft. We don't have to do anything else in free agency. But this is a probably low risk. I don't know what his market is, but a potentially low risk, high reward option for a pass rush. And again, it might not pan out. I don't really know, but if you just look at his career, he has 58 pressures on 417 attempts and 10 sacks in his 3-year career. That's 14% pressure rate. So you can't even say, well, it was just a kind of a small fluky thing. Okay, kind of. But it's not like he was bad forever and then became good. These are his career stats. Even as a rookie, he had 4 pressures and 2 sacks on 25 attempts. It's just stupid. I'd be interested in possibly looking into that. All right, well, we just ended Tier 2, so I guess we'll take a break and see if we can. There's so many more to get through. We'll try to go faster, I guess. But we'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, at 21 is Chase Young. Kind of talked about Chase Young already. I think there's a potential fit there with our defensive coordinator having some familiarity with him. He obviously was a very early pick for a reason. I would not be opposed to getting Chase Young. I think there's reason why he has not been able to stay on the team. Injuries are certainly a concern, but high risk, high reward with Chase Young. Justin Fields at 25. Here's what we do, okay? We make a trade with the Seahawks for DK Metcalf. In that package is Malik, and that brings the price down to like a 4th or 5th round pick. And then we go get Justin Fields and make him our backup. Oh, I'm kidding. Hassan Reddick, edge rusher, not my favorite option. He's a 30-year-old undersized guy. Really only had a couple flash-in-the-pan years, mostly with Philadelphia, which seems to be a thing. New Jersey, kind of. The New York Jets kind of bought into that nonsense. Plus, there was a whole situation with him sitting out the entire year and whatnot. If we did it, cool. He can get after the quarterback. but I don't think we're going to, and I don't really want to. Mekhi Becton is somewhat interesting for a couple of reasons. I mean, he was a number 11 overall pick, just an absolute freak of a player, but 6'7", 363 pounds, had serious issues with staying healthy. The Jets finally had enough, sent him off to Philadelphia. Philadelphia tried something different. They said, rather than playing him at tackle, why don't we move him into right guard? He had a 70 run blocking grade, but a 60 pass blocking grade. I think he's just too big and not very able, which is probably why they kicked him inside. But even then, he gave up 12 sacks. 12 sacks, 50 total pressures. Really pretty poor pass blocker. But, again, if the guy's basically free at this point, it would be a fun toy to play with. But I think he's probably going to cost too much just on kind of like a whim. Aaron Jones, funny enough. DeMarcus Lawrence is out there. Long time Dallas Cowboy. Since 2014, he was a second-round pick. The guy has been elite up until last year. So 2023, he still had a 91 PFF grade. 48 pressures and 4 sacks is not the greatest, but a decent enough pass rusher and an elite run defender. However, he only played 168 snaps. He played in 4 games last year and missed the rest of the season, and in those 4 games, he didn't play very well. He's going to be 33 years old this year, so there's a lot of negatives. 33 years old, coming off an injury, which, it's always harder to come back when you get older. He's primarily a run defender, even though he's a decent pass rusher, but those are 3 pretty big flags to not go down that road for any amount of serious money. Byron Murphy, cornerback for the Minnesota Vikings, spent 4 years at Arizona, 2 at Minnesota. He did have a pretty good year last year, but it was a big outlier year. I would tend to look at that as fool's gold, especially considering, the defensive coordinator they had was probably doing some pretty good things with him. Maybe there's something there. Early second-round pick, borderline first-round pick in 2019. But, the Minnesota Vikings are unbelievably desperate for corner help, and if they don't want to keep him, I think that should tell you pretty much everything you need to know. Patrick Mekari is a guard, or he plays really all over the place, which is a big benefit for the Green Bay Packers. It's actually kind of an interesting option I hadn't really looked at. He has played since, so he's been with Baltimore for 6 years. He was a undrafted free agent in 2019 out of Cal. 6'4", 305. He's played 685 snaps at left tackle, 965 at left guard, 918 at center, 272 at right guard, and 1,210 at right tackle. He plays everywhere on the offensive line. He had a 72 pass blocking grade last year and a 56 run blocking, which the run blocking isn't great, but that's also a really down year for him. The year before, it was 72 run blocking, 63 pass blocking, but I don't really hate it. He's only 27 years old. As a really high floor candidate, I in no way would be opposed. This is a guy that you could have him compete at right guard and probably win the job. And if he doesn't, because of Jordan Morgan or Sean Ryan, he can play center. Now, he hasn't really played much center since 2020. 2019-2020, he was primarily a center, and then he got switched out to right tackle, then left tackle, then left/right tackle, then he was a right tackle/left guard. He's all over the place. But yeah, to bring him in and just be a Swiss Army knife that can win potentially a right guard or center slot, not a premier player, but can set a floor at either of those positions, and worst case scenario, he ends up being solid depth. Depending on what he's asking for, I'm kind of all in on Patrick Mekari if he's pretty cheap, and a guy that could even, in a pinch, play tackle for you. Probably not a super great tackle, but again, in a pinch. At 34, defensive tackle DJ Jones. He is 30 years old, offers little to nothing as a pass rusher, and is only a middling run defender and a horrific tackler. We have plenty of guys that can do what he's already doing, so no thank you. Poona Ford is at 35. He's 29 years old. he's intriguing because this past year with the Chargers, he had an 80 run defense grade, a 70 pass rush grade. I don't know how. His pass rush numbers sucked. But, he's a 5'11", 310 guy as a possible replacement for a TJ Slayton that actually can do the job that we've been wanting him to do as like a bigger one tack or nose tackle, whatever you want to call it. It could be intriguing. The problem that I have is the year before that with Buffalo, he had a 47 run defense grade in the year. Well, actually, he was hurt that year. He's been, this is an option. It is an option, I think. Again, really not a doing backflips kind of a thing, but if it's sort of a, look, we got TJ Slayton to be a one tech to help us with the run. He's freaking useless. One of the worst defensive linemen in all of football, not just on our defensive line. And we just want to get a cheap option that can actually do that one tech job. I feel like this is the guy. I mean, let me just run through, just on a consistency basis from last year. Again, 29 years old. He's getting up there a little bit, but who cares? 70, heavy rounding, 70, 60, 50, 70, 70, 70, 60, 70, 60, 60, 80, 60, 60, 70, 70, 60, 70, 70. I mean, let me do TJ Slayton's run defense. 50, 50, 50, 30, 70, 50, 30, 40, 70, 50, 50, 50, 50, 80, 30, 40, 70, 40. Okay? So yeah, I would take Poona Ford as a TJ Slayton replacement any frickin' day of the week. I would take Javon Bullard as a TJ Slayton replacement at this point. The fact that some people are like looking at TJ Slayton as an actual bright spot on this team, I don't understand. He had his worst year ever as a Green Bay Packer and has almost every single year been a worse run defender than a pass rusher, and he's always been a dog crap pass rusher. I hate to be harsh. It just annoys me to no end. As much as Packer fans are just furious with some Packers and I try to defend them, Slayton is the opposite for me. I'm done. I'm over it. I don't like it. I don't want it. I just don't like it. Poona Ford, again, not a slam dunk, but we're talking, depending on the price, if this is cheap as a one-to-one swap out for Slayton, all in. Tevin Jenkins is really intriguing. I honestly didn't even know he was a free agent. I was talking recently about the Bears and what they had done. I thought he was just a replacement for, or a possible backup. So the bottom line with Tevin Jenkins is pretty straightforward. He is a phenomenal interior offensive lineman that can't stay healthy. When he's healthy, this is a slam dunk guard. I think this dude, if you believed he could stay healthy, could come in and win a guard spot for the Green Bay Packers and be just last year. And he didn't miss that much time, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. He missed, 2-3 games? He had a 76 pass blocking grade and a 74 run blocking grade. He's 27 years old. Now, I don't think the Packers are going to do it. I think the injuries are too much of a problem. So let me go through this real quick. I just pulled this up. Here's a list of Tevin Jenkins' injuries. He missed his rookie year, his first 9 games of his rookie year due to back surgery. In 2022, hip and neck injuries. Finished the season on IR. 2023, strained both calves, causing him to miss games, and had a late season concussion. In 2024, he had a series of injuries, including injured ribs, injured ankle, knee injury, another ankle injury, and a calf injury. The freaking volume went down again. Apologies if I didn't remember afterward to fix it. By the way, I keep forgetting to do that for Packernet After Dark. The calls can be really quiet. Sometimes I remember to post-edit. It's a new thing for me. I never used to do that. Trying to do a little bit better with that. So if sometimes they're quiet, I apologize. But so Tevin is, I wouldn't say slam dunk, but a really solid guard. He was initially they wanted him to be a tackle. And he just wasn't good, and I made fun of the Bears. Like, oh, you thought Tevin Jenkins was going to be this superstar player, and he sucks, ha. And then they moved him inside, and he was really good, and he was like, oh, crap. But he couldn't stay healthy, to the point where the Bears just let him go. And this is a team that is pretty desperate for offensive linemen, so they are very fed up. But a really good run blocker that can pass block, I think, is at least intriguing. But again, the Packers, I think, are not going to screw around with this many injuries. Speaking of Joey Bosa, kind of already talked about Joey Bosa since he was released, but I just, 29 years old, just coming off a pretty rough year. He's had injury issues since forever, so he has not been healthy for 3 straight years. The last time he was healthy, I think, was around 2021. In 2020, he wasn't healthy. So, and 2018, he wasn't healthy. In 2016, he wasn't healthy. So, like I said, I think it's about 3 years he's been mostly healthy since 2016. So, shockingly good football player. I mean, really, really talented, but the injuries have just screwed him. At 38, Rasul Douglas. That would be kind of funny, although Rasul is not a very good football player. I highlight that because people are still mad that we got rid of him. Look, we got rid of him mid-2023. 2024 is his first full season with Buffalo. He had a 54 PFF grade and a 51 coverage grade. He gave up 569 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 3 pass breakups, 116.9 passer rating. When targeted, it was the worst of his entire career. He had 2 games where he graded in the 70s. Weeks 8 and 9, and that's it. Everything else was bad. In fact, after week 9, I don't know if he had an injury or what, it was real bad. 40-60-40, 40-50, 60-50, 30-30. Love Rasul Douglas. Really appreciate what he got for the Packers. Massive round of applause because really 3 of his 4 ever good years were with Green Bay. And his best year was 2023, which was half Green Bay and half Buffalo. And that's when we got rid of him. And it looked like a stupid move, and then he just completely tanks the very next year. I mean, I can't just give credit to Brian Gutekunst because this has been a Packers thing since at least Ted Thompson, this incredible sixth sense to look at a guy that's playing well and go, this guy's about to suck soon, and trading them for value and then watching them tank and realizing we just robbed that team. Incredible. Tier 4 now. Paulson Adebo, cornerback. 3rd-round pick out of Stanford. Back in 2021, had 1 good year in 2023, but that's basically it. He was not super great rookie year. Sophomore year was horrific. Breakout 3rd year, and then injured 4th year. It's not a no, but there's just a lot of issues here. I mean, I guess the yes would come in if you look at it and say he broke out. He was continuing his breakout season in year 2, even though he didn't grade out super well, but it was fine. And then got hurt, but we still think he kind of turned a corner and he's a good player and he's not even yet 26. If that's the case, then yeah, the Packers could absolutely buy in. His injury, by the way, was a broken femur, which just sounds like the worst possible thing ever. I think stupid frickin' volume. I think the expectation is that he'll be back by the start of the season. I don't know what the thoughts are on can you fully recover from such a terrible injury. I would think you probably could because it's not like a joint, you know what I mean? It's just the bone was broken and now it's not broken anymore. Hopefully that's all it is, but who knows? I don't know how these things work. Wide receiver Keenan Allen. Thought it was kind of stupid when the Bears did it, although for different reasons because they were nowhere near competing. But Keenan just didn't look good. He had a pretty bad attitude last year. I just don't think that it's understandable. I just don't think it makes a ton of sense, although the funny thing about it is they paid a premium price for Keenan because they wanted premium Keenan. They didn't get premium Keenan. They got something significantly worse, probably tanked his value, and there's a really good chance he could bounce back. I mean, when you look at Keenan Allen, he had an 86 PFF grade in 2023, and that was not an outlier. That's just what he does every single year, and then fell off a cliff. It's not impossible that you can still get a decent version of Keenan Allen for a fraction of the cost because the Bears just completely, like I said, tanked his value. But at 33 years old, do I really want to risk that and then looking stupid and having Bears fans laugh and say, did you not learn anything? It'd be great if you could pull it off, but it's not worth the risk, in my opinion. Wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins is also available. He was split last year between Tennessee and Kansas City. He's never really completely fallen off. I mean, he is going on 33 years old. His worst year outside of his rookie year was in 2022. It was a 73. This past year, 77, and that's playing for 2 different teams. He played significantly better for the Chiefs. 79 overall, 78 receiving, 466 yards and 5 touchdowns. There was some talk about him possibly revitalizing his career as a strong slot, but he has not done that. Definitely not my top option. But but it might be, if we're being honest, it might be similar to kind of a Davante play, as much as in my mind I want to pretend Davante is a premier player and DeAndre is some washed up bum, even though they're the same age and on the same career trajectory right now and grading out about the same. Amari Cooper, just throw him in that exact same camp. He's 30 going on 31. Has had a really solid career pretty much every single year. 2023, he had 1,300 yards and 5 touchdowns, 80 PFF grade. 2024, he got split between 2 different teams. It didn't go super well, and that's, I mean, for pretty obvious reasons. I mean, he was with Cleveland in 2023, he played for Cleveland and Buffalo in 2024, and it just never super materialized. But again, could you get him at a discounted price, and could you expect somewhat of a bounce back because he has a little bit more stability as opposed to playing for 2 different teams, et cetera, et cetera? Absolutely. So I would put him in the same boat as, sort of Davante, DeAndre, same kind of thing in my opinion. It's older, higher risk, but they also have shown some pretty elite characteristics. Maybe they can have a bounce back, maybe they won't, I don't know. Levi Onwuzurike, defensive tackle for the Detroit Lions. Spent 3 years there and is a free agent at 27 years old. I mean, he's just if you wanted him, he's a depth piece, and that's it. He had a 66 run defense grade, 66 pass rush, 47 pressures on 447 attempts is fine. He doesn't get any sacks. He has 5 in his 3 years. 3 this past year. But, yeah, I mean, if you want to just grab a guy for depth, but again, defensive tackle is not an area we really need depth. In my opinion, I mean, if you want to, fine. I just don't see the point. You got guard Ben Bredesen, is a bad football player, and I don't want him. Asante Samuel Jr. was a second-round pick for the Chargers. He spent his 4 years there and is being let go. He actually, starting in his second year, which is really when he started, he's a good football player. He really only started 2 years, had a 76 and 76 coverage grade. However, only played 4 games in 2024. And, didn't grade out well, but it's 4 games. And I guess they're moving on. At 25 years old, it's a little odd. I guess at 5'10", 180, he's very undersized, and maybe the injury issue kind of scared him off. I guess it was just a stinger, but it shut him down for the season after 4 games. It just seems like a weird thing to have him really not have, as far as I can tell, injury issues. And he gets 1 injury, and they're like, screw this guy. Okay. He had a pretty good couple of years there, but whatever. Stupid volume again. But yeah, it wouldn't be my favorite option, but still, 25 years old, that's demonstrated something. He's not worth nothing, and I think there's a good chance he can come in and be better than the guys that we have for a handful of bucks. Maybe, I don't know. Apparently he wants to return to the Chargers. That may get done. I don't really know, but kind of weird. Got defensive tackle Jaron Reed at 54. He's been a Packer before. He was here in 2022, so we don't really need to speculate too much. He had 33 pressures, 4 sacks, and a 59 run defense grade. A little bit of a resurgence in 2024 with Seattle, but do I want to double back and see if maybe he can do something at 32? No, I don't. Let me read off some others. I'm not going to go through every single one of these. Darius Slayton, wide receiver, is available. Brandon Scherf, obviously was for a while. He was getting massive amounts of money out in Washington. He was franchise tagged like 3 times or something crazy. I don't know, but Scherf is available. Deo Odenigbo, some people are real big on that for the Packers. I am not. Tyler Lockett, the wide receiver. Tyre Tart, defensive tackle. James Daniels, the guard. I was a fan of him for quite a long time, but that was a long time ago. Tershawn Wharton, defensive tackle, and that's the rest of the Tier 4 guys. Tier 5, Kevin Zeitler, guard. Calais Campbell at defensive tackle. Darius Slay at corner. I'm skipping a bunch of positions, by the way, just for the sake of it, but just, if something happens I didn't mention at linebacker or something, that would be why. Tier 6, Elijah Moore, wide receiver. Christian Fulton at corner. Aaron Banks at guard. Josh Myers at center at 76. Ryan Kelly, center at 78. Joseph Asai at edge. Harold Landry at edge. Baron Browning at edge. Bobby Brown, defensive tackle. Will Hernandez, guard. B.J. Hill at defensive tackle. Diami Brown, wide receiver. Azeez Ojulari at edge. Draymond Jones, defensive tackle. Mike Hilton at corner. Nick Westbrook at wide receiver. Jordan Lewis at corner. Tier 7, and I think we'll stop at that if there is any more tiers, because we're well past anybody I'd care about at this point already. Michael Holt at edge. Adam Butler, defensive tackle. Akello Witherspoon at corner. Dante Fowler, edge rusher. Dante Jackson at corner. Demarcus Robinson, wide receiver. K'Lavon Chason at edge. Sebastian Joseph Day, defensive tackle. Josh Palmer, wide receiver. Benjamin St. Juste at corner. Darrell Taylor, edge. Nate Hobbs, corner. Josh Uche, edge. And then there are other tiers. We're not going to go through them. I think there's one more, but we're done. So, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of players. Not a ton that I would do backflips for. A couple, well, maybe we'll see. And just a few I'd be really excited about. But the other things, we might as well just touch on it because I think we're going to be a little busy tomorrow. Myles Garrett did sign, which I am surprised by. Not necessarily that he ended back with them, but that it happened so quickly. I mean, we just had a sit-down, apparently, which I guess went the complete opposite direction. We were told it was kind of a sit-down where Myles Garrett wanted to express to them, I'm not coming back, so just knock it off. And apparently that laid the foundation for them to offer him an absurd contract, and he's like, holy crap, all right, fine, screw it. Which, like I said, I mean, he can hold out as long as he's willing to say it's really not about the money. But apparently that was only partially true. And it was, I'm not here for the money unless the money's stupid money, and that's what they got him. $40 million a year is what the details were. 6 years total, 4-year extension, $40 million per year. No trade clause, $204.8 million, $100 million in cash. First 3 years, $88.8 million. It's hard to say no to that. Von Miller was released, as we had said. And then DK Metcalf, apparently the price has come down to a second-round pick. As I said, the whole first-round pick plus a player thing was stupid. They threw it out there. Why not? Same reason Packers said, hey, maybe they said it. Second-round pick for Jair. Not because it's happening, but you throw it out there. You hope that there's a feeding frenzy and people start spiraling up to your price and somebody throws it out there. But apparently it was never close. Nobody was willing to even come close to entertaining it. Now they're starting to walk it back and say, okay, how about a second? Because remember, you kind of want to get these things done before the free agency starts, right? We got to kind of figure out what we're doing here. So, all right, what about a second? Come on, guys. And that's kind of where they're at. I don't even know if they're going to get that, to be completely honest, but they're going to try. It might settle on a third or something to that effect. Just grabbing a couple news items here because it's still relatively early, so we'll just wrap these up here. If anything big happens, we'll just do a special thing. But ESPN's Jordan Renan reports, after speaking to people around the league, the Aaron Rodgers to the Giants thing hardly seems like a slam dunk. Renan accurately points out the Giants are not the most desirable situation. Well, no crap. This is what I've been saying since day one. Does he really want to go there? Why would you want to go there? Apparently the 49ers are having a good conversation with Joey Bosa. That would be hilarious if both Bosa brothers were there. Be kind of elite if they could just stay healthy. Seahawks re-signed Jaron Reed. So that's one guy we just talked about for a half a second. That's off the board. Chiefs re-signed Nick Bolton to a 3-year deal. And the Lions released Zadarius Smith. It's funny because they just brought back a guy and then released Zadarius. So now Zadarius has to go around talking about how the Detroit Lions are a bunch of bums and they're terrible and he hates them. And then, he has to go to Chicago, I think now? I think that's how that's supposed to play out. But anyways, I'm going to get out of here, man. This is it. This is the big day. You all have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.